Hello everyone and welcome back to Wargame Red Dragon. I have a replay review for you guys today. This is a ranked game between Fenor and TipsyMipsy, who is by now a much higher rank, done at his request as well. And I also have a guest with me today, Haymaker, who's here because he and I play very differently. I tend to play a little bit slower, more mechanized, and Haymaker is more of a moto player. So do you want to say hello, introduce yourself, and maybe give us some opening thoughts here?
Hey all, I'm Haymaker, and this is gonna be a fun game to watch.
You had a comment right here, didn't you?
Yeah, opening thoughts. Ultimately, I think there needs to be more AA heading in that Bravo column. There's none, and I think for whatever's going to his 2-pointer, there needs to be more motorized infantry. He has very little.
So, why is motorized infantry so important when you're going down into Delta, if I can just ask?
Those buildings need to be garrisoned. If there's any sort of drop of a moto push, I mean, if there's a helicopter drop, yes, you can respond accordingly and stop them early. But the point is if there's not, you need to be able to get into those buildings. They're very, very important for advanced defenses.
Gotcha, and I guess just on that note, like, even when I'm not doing a heavy opener into Bravo Delta, I usually have a cheap recon helicopter coming over here, and we looked at the deck that Tipsy was using, and that's not really an option, and I think this is one of the maps that can really make you feel it sometimes, because let's just flip to Fenor's opener for just a second. We're going to see this Tiger come out and basically do the same thing from the other side. So this is going to come over here, and it's going to get a sense of what's going on in the middle. And for all Tipsy knows, at this point, there could be about 400 or 500 points going in the air right into his 2-point. And there'd be no way to know. Right, so yeah. I'm not trying to say you can cover all openers with your own. Sometimes you just get countered in the opener and things like that, and it happens. But this feels like something where unit choice affected the safety of the opener, at least to me.
So, I like this left side push, though. I think this can probably be, as long as it's done properly. I think there's
so we got what? We got 2 M1A1. That one's up really far. My worry is the order here, more than anything else. So, okay, so Tiger's engaging. We're going to feel the no anti-air in this section quite a lot. Nothing's there really to zone out the Tiger.
Super Dragons with...
Cav Scouts? That's
Cav
this unit.
Scouts is an interesting option.
So, 3 front does have the M2 Browning, but so does the 5-point option as well. Is this something that you'd say is interesting in terms of interesting could work, or interesting as in I secretly hate it, but I'm a polite American, so I say interesting instead of bad?
The latter. I would say that the breakpoint is really... The 15 AP power breakpoint is such a big deal, and when you only have 4 missiles, it's so painful. The base Cav Scouts can work because they're so cheap, but I would not pay 10 points for this unit. And
actually, I think something that we had mentioned earlier when Haymaker and I were looking at this before is we both would have loved to see the 5 points from the Super Dragon go into upgrading the M2A1, sorry, the M2 to the M2A1, because this also has 15 AP, but the M2A1 has 20. And so the Super Dragon, yeah, decent accuracy, but this didn't really feel like an effective unit, and the M2A1 hits so much harder for 5 points more, it almost feels like a shame not to bring the M2A1. And keep in mind, all of this is coming from somebody, like, I'm a Brig Gen, Haymaker's High Colonel, I think, usually. Have you gotten to Brig yet?
No, I've not yet gotten to Brig.
I'm so sad.
Every time I get beaten down by amphetamine.
Okay. The player, not the, anyway. So keep in mind, like, neither one of us plays USA all that much, but the M2A1 just feels like a reasonable upgrade to pay for, and this is a place where we both kind of feel like points were spent that didn't need to be, that could shift that buy over. It's not a hard recommendation, it's more of a, wanted to ask you why you're doing it, if it's really worthwhile. So here it's
mid, though, did not seem to turn out so well.
Yeah, I mean, they're taking fire, they're not in a building, right, so no damage mitigation there. It's 3 infantry units sent up to 2 building spots. That's sort of what's going to happen. And here, like, this is good. The Ontos is good fire support. It was a nice thing to recognize that the M1A1, the first one, was too far up. So I like that response, pulling that over.
I would keep them together, though.
Like grouped or just in the same...
Either grouped or just close together. Usually it's really beneficial to have both tanks fire one after the other, especially since these are M1A1s, which are pretty decent at tank v tank engagements.
Yeah, that's fair. Plus, like, we've seen now what you're playing against, and we know that it's DGC because there's Dutch, there's German, and I believe, have we seen prototype units? Maybe not. Yeah, with the Patu, right?
Patu, yeah.
So it can't be blue, and DGC doesn't really field good cluster bombers, so there's less of a risk for having those close together now than there would be against something like, say, Landjut or Scandinavia. So the initial caginess, I understand you don't want to lose these both to an opener bomber, but that's not something DGC really does all that often. And so that, I think, is something that could have helped a little bit in the opener.
So let's talk about this deployment of forces in Delta.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that this could have been done in a much more efficient manner.
How do you mean?
So the riflemen, there's two big problems here. So first off, the lack of infantry. There's just not enough stuff here. There's just not enough ground troops here. The riflemen and the cab scouts going to hold off these corps mariners is what he's forced to do, but not necessarily the most optimal play. If he had more troops, he could pick it and then deal with the corps mariner with the Nighthawk once they're in vision. But as it is, he has to play super cagey with his riflemen, preserving them so that way he just doesn't lose his only AT capability.
Yeah, and this has consequences because the fact that that Nighthawk is blind means that both these corps mariners survive. Now, yeah, one of them's on 1 strength, and I believe it does die to your rifleman 90 pretty soon. But that's sort of luck, and this is... So the responsive Nighthawk buy to pressure is always a risk, and having a blind bomb on top of that is even more of a risk, because if we think about what we've seen so far, we've seen a 2A1 around here, we saw a Tiger, but we know there are corps mariner over here. It's reasonable to assume that there's going to be a lot of pressure in Delta, and that your Nighthawk might not be free. Even with the context of this sort of reinforcements coming in Echo, it's been long enough now, and this is a relatively short path. Those could be new points. So the question of where's a lot of your opponent's stuff is still sort of an open question. And the fact that a lot of it was sort of holding in mid is not something you necessarily could have guaranteed. So the Nighthawk just felt a little risky to me. Nighthawks always feel risky to me, and I lose a fair number of them because I'm not amazing with them, but like, I don't know, I think you're probably gonna hear us talk about the Nighthawk a couple of times. And that first one was not terrible. I've seen people do that. It did damage the corps mariner. It did stymie this attack a little bit. There was a reason, but it was a very expensive decision. And expensive decisions in the early game that don't pay off can put you behind on value as the game progresses. That's really all I'm saying here.
Yeah. I would agree. Absolutely.
Another thing I just want to say...
Oh,
go ahead.
Here's another interesting decision. So the M1A1s have now rotated off from the 1-pointers over to Bravo towards the med. Now, I agree that those M1A1s need to be out of the 2 1-pointers on the left side, because that's for the most part been contained, and those tanks aren't really serving much purpose there. However, I disagree with the choice to rotate into Bravo and over into your 2-pointer. So
why is that?
I think that at this point in time, you don't have enough infantry support, you don't have enough recon support in Bravo to capitalize on having these tanks duking it out with either other tanks or other vehicles, and you have the smalls and rangers to lock down that main road. You just need... you're fine on the defensive, and you have no AA there. These tanks are going to be better served shoring up your weakest position, which is the 2-pointer, because if the other player is able to get CVs or infantry into and get a proper foothold in the 2-pointer, then this is going to be a much more of a knockdown, drag-out fight.
Yeah, and I think the lack of anti-air is really another reason to be a little cagey with these guys, because so Fëanor doesn't tend to buy the most planes. But I think there's an engagement. We'll get up to it because this is a long replay, and I want to do the full review and all that, but I also don't want to keep you here forever and ever. This is now spotted, and I know a ton of players who would have said, okay, that's an M1A1, it's presenting side armor to my plane spawn, and I'm going to Peace Rhine it and net 15 points, and then keep going. Because the Peace Rhine, like, even if it dies, I'm still up 15 points. If it doesn't die, I'm still fine. Like, this has been spotted for a while, right? And there's nothing to dissuade that. So, a lot of people... In fact, probably if you were playing me, you probably would have had a Peace Rhine shoved at it already, because if I had the points to do it, I would have viewed that as a relatively free pickup. And there was definitely enough time to get in, kill it, and get out.
Now, another thing to note is that 2-point pushes on this map are incredibly popular. Oh boy, ACAV and Alpha, we did not know.
Yeah. This guy gets down there, and the Nighthawk buy as well. Also, I mean, the Nighthawk's back out. So once you've bought it, you need to use it. The question's going to be target selection, right? So you have recon on these AMX Pre's. You can see their veteran C1. That means they're Natra. That's an ATGM. You can see all of this, right? And yeah, Natra, this is 30 points all in one place. But is that a tempting enough target? Because whenever you send your Nighthawk in, you're risking it dying. You're also saying this is going to be on cooldown, and I'm okay with missing whatever targets may become available while it's on cooldown. And going for these, like, what could 3 Natra really have done to you here? You have the M2, you have Rifleman here. I mean, it's not an incredibly strong position, but you would expect that these Natra would probably not get their value. And yeah, just that simple reinforcement is enough to deal with it. So why come in and say, nope, these Natra must die? Especially when I believe that's a 2A1 is right there. There's a KCT right here as well. Yeah, it just seemed like selection was a little bit of a problem. And a lot of this is nitpicky, but nitpicky wins games or loses them against Lieutenant Generals, right? Like, Fëanor is a flipping scary player. And right here we see, yeah, like this is just one of the consequences. Yeah, it's detract, yeah, it's a tempting target, and yeah, going back up to get the kill here was probably the right decision, but this is sort of what Haymaker was talking about, I think, about not having those infantry in there earlier, makes these guys a little exposed. Yeah. On this side, I mean, what's fighting against Core Mariner? It seems like you're doing it in a reasonable way for USA, where you bring in armor, you bring in boxes, you drown them in bodies.
This is the way USA plays. Rifleman spam M1s, and then you bring in more expensive assets elsewhere.
Yeah, so you see how those YPs were coming up this way. I like what you're doing here with the M551s and the Cav Scouts. Trying to encroach upon this reinforcement route. Getting recon on it is really, really good. And will help you stabilize this position 100%. So I like that. The SMAW, these guys impressed me continually. Your SMAW usage, I think, was quite nice.
I'm a big fan of SMAWs. I mean, I'm a big fan of recoilless rifle infantry in general but the SMAWs are particularly nice because of their extra range.
See, Haymaker, what'd I tell you about that M551? Like,
no, the 5HE can really hit hard.
Yeah.
So at this point in the game, I think there needs to be more infantry flooding into Delta.
Yeah.
This is going to be a grind the whole way through. You need to get those other towns reinforced. You need to worry about the losses that you're taking with your SMAWs and riflemen. The Cobra is not terrible. Like, the Cobra is not knowing what deck you have, what units you have in your deck at the moment is not it's not bad, but I think it would be more optimal for that to have been a double stack of infantry, or a double stack and a little bit.
Yeah, and basically I think what we're going for here is, like, your opener got sort of stuck not knowing which way it could really fully commit to. And the current situation is you have to know if you need to dive left, if you need to dive right, and you have to do it really, really well. But there are ways for blue to get in here that you can't see. And so there could well be lots of infantry in here and you have no idea whether or not they are. In fact, if we take a look, there are Panzergrenadier 90 here. There could also be KCT, there could also be NATGM, there could be a lot of stuff back here, and there's been lack of recon on it for so long that we have no way of knowing, and that's a really big problem. It's always better to know what you have to deal with, especially when you're relying on something like the Nighthawk to get high value kills.
Now, one nitpick left you and this is something pickets are incredibly important on this map as it is so wide, and Fëanor is particularly of note of playing wide.
Yeah, I mean, he's been pulling your attention on both ends of it, really.
On both ends, and the more your attention is spread between two different things, the harder it is for you to recognize when something comes around on the flank. So having combat units that can stop those sneaky plays on the flanks, particularly on this left flank, is super important when you are playing against someone who's going to pull your attention all over the map, and you're not going to be able to actually consciously be aware of all of these things.
Gotcha. And here we have another case of, like, did the Nighthawk really need to clean up those Natra, or was that something the Rifleman could just move up and handle? And yeah, like, there's a Leopard 2A1 here, but it's not really relevant for that engagement. And further, I think actually we missed something earlier when we were watching it. Natra just walked right through those Cav Scouts.
Oh my.
I think, honestly, I think it would not be the worst thing to just take out that card and replace it with something like the Recon, the cheaper Recon Cobra.
Yeah.
Because Cav Scouts are not really... Like Haymaker was just saying combat-capable pickets. These are not combat-capable pickets, even against line infantry. Even against apparently stopping militia from just having a good old day. So that's just a little
this
unfortunate.
ambush from the KZT has turned out pretty well, and I think these engagements are going to prove to start adding up.
Yeah, like that's really expensive. It's a really nice pickup, and the Sma here doing really excellent work. And as long as they are, I mean, why not bring out some resupply as well? Like if you're going to be fighting here for a long time, oh, this is beautiful. I know these guys got an M1, but like, oh man.
And that's what you need. See, a Recon Cobra would have been a really good purchase in this position. Yes, the Cobra has the TOW2s, but there's only 4 missiles, and they're not that good of missiles anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there's TOW1s actually, just the 15 AP.
Oh yeah, those are the TOW1s. Sorry, I misspoke.
And the Recon Cobra is actually 5 points cheaper too, which is interesting. And like, if you want to play a little lower to the ground, which I feel like USA often does want to do, I'd even go so far as to say, you know what, you have the longbow, just, you know, dump this, get the 45.1, that's better anti-infantry anyway.
I would also argue that when you're buying helicopters, quantity is almost never the solution.
How do you mean?
So usually helicopters are, I mean, there are obvious exceptions, but usually when a situation where a helicopter is doing well and winning is almost never drastically improved by having 2 or 3 additional helicopters.
Because they just get shot down and die anyway.
Because because one helicopter has the firepower and the anti-tank capability to do fairly well against a sizable number of targets. Most gunship helicopters have about 8 missiles, a full complement of rocket pods, and an autocannon, which means against almost all the targets that it's going to run into, it's going to be just as capable as 2 helicopters. The situations where 2 helicopters become really relevant is only when you're taking subpar helicopters.
Gotcha. I would argue like the AH-1E. And actually here, this is interesting. So we were watching this while Haymaker was talking, but the FL-12 singly shut down a ton of infantry that was trying to retake here. I think, you know, your deck has bigger tanks in it than the M1. I understand M1's a decent forest fighting tank, and that's why I brought it out, and it's a good idea. I think it's really common for people to have fire support when they're holding this side of the towns. And a larger tank or even any tank back here is a good thing before you make this push, even if it slows you down by a minute or so to get the tank over here. I mean, you have an M1 right there. I think that could have helped avoid some losses and then push some more riflemen actually into these sections of town. Like, imagine if your Assault Pioneers and this double stack had stayed healthy. 4 Panzergren can't really do anything about that, and a single FL-12 really made the difference here. And on top of it, this is dead 6 ways from Sunday. But it was dead from the Cobras, and now your Nighthawk is once again out of commission. So it's little things, right? Like and you know, I was thinking I'm gonna do a live stream, I think, pretty soon, really just critiquing heavily one of my own replays as well, because you guys don't see it, but I do, like, the replays that I post, I'll comment and I'll criticize, and I'll often criticize my own stuff quite a lot, but when I really want to learn from one of my own games, win, loss, or tie, it it makes this look like a walk in the park compared to the brutality of the other, of how I treat my own stuff. So I want to show you guys that process some point as well, especially because we'll have a fair number of replay reviews up on the channel in the coming week, and you know, I don't want to throw stones at everybody else without letting you know I throw stones at myself too, although that's a interesting phrasing, I think. But yeah, I mean, the lack of an anchor here really just made this easier for Feener to hold. And you have a good position.
If M1A1 had rotated, that would have helped.
Yeah, if the M1A1, if one of the two, if even one of the two had rotated, like if you wanted to keep one in Bravo and then rotate the other one in here, I think that also would have been a fine thing to do defensively as well. So this is what you're mentioning about quantity, isn't it? So one of them died, the other one's sort of stuck. 120 point pickup.
Dies to the Gappard.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Bradley should not be pushing up all on its own without infantry recon. You know that there's infantry that are going to be able to side shot you there.
You know, speaking of infantry recon, like I know these are rangers coming up here. I almost think the answer to a lot of what went wrong here is patience. Patience and force composition. Have the M1 up here when you have better recon and a more well-rounded force composition, and then the trading here would have been a lot less one-sided, which really was a shame, because I mean it when I say you're in a really strong position. Like, pushing Echo at the beginning without completely losing your 2 is a way to just win on this map in ranked. It's a good strategy. It's a strategy lots of people do. It's a strategy I've done, and it can definitely work. Okay, Nighthawk, Blind Bomb. No, Nighthawk not even killing 2 Nathra. So that Nighthawk run netted you 0 points.
And those Nathra are already being pushed. That position is already being pushed by an M1, small team, and Rangers, and you're smoking it. This is
good smoke, by the way. I like this.
This is good smoke. Like, this is a good. You're doing all of the separate bits in a lot of ways right, but you're task saturating your M1, your Nighthawk against targets that you can deal with through other ways.
Yeah, like for example, how much better would it have been to use the Nighthawk to kill this 2A1 once you're pushing up, the Nathra are firing, you get recon on the 2A1, and now you no longer have a risky tank engagement, because the M1A1 doesn't have the world's thickest armor. You know, 17 versus 16 here, 18 versus 19, it does outclass the 2A1, but not to within a miss all the time, right? Like,
and honestly, the 2A1 would have been panicked here if it
even survived, which it shouldn't have. I would imagine the 2A1 would be dead to a Nighthawk. I mean, enough of my 2A5s died to Nighthawks. I would hope it killed the 2A1. Goodness gracious.
2A1 has 2 top armor or 3 top armor?
You know, I don't remember, but we can check. No, we can't. It went invisible. Come on. Recon.
So again, Feenor keeps pushing this weak point in the line of
3 top.
3 top. Feenor keeps pushing this weak point in the line where Tipsy just is missing a sizable amount of picket and infantry.
And exchanging it for good pressure. Like, this is a good positive step.
It's exchanging it for good pressure, but it's also a situation where the most important sector is the 2-pointer.
Yeah. And I want to point out, like, there is no perfect game of Wargame, and that goes for both players, right? So the AH1E coming up here as an answer, this, you know, I've tried to answer with things like that before, and they die. And they die because, well, maybe you're playing against Eurocore and there's a Kratal, or maybe you're playing against what you are, DGC, and there's a Gepard A2. Right, 2,800 meter range certainly kills the Cobra by now.
Another Nighthawk strike that was a blind strike.
Oh, this was, I mean, goodness gracious.
And this is why the Pivats is so good. That acquire time.
Yeah, it's very nice. We missed the first Tiger kill as well. It was earlier from the Stinger team there, which, yeah, it's a nice kill. I think both of these, honestly, both the Tiger kills were probably overextends from Feenor, which, capitalizing that, capitalizing on that is the sign of a good player, and making those mistakes is a sign of you're a wargame player. You make mistakes, right? Like, overextending with a recon helicopter is something even the best players do in even the best tourneys. So it was nice that you were able to get those kills. 100%. Good play. Alright. So,
this is a good response to fill in with smalls and riflemen, though. Now you got 3 2-stacks coming in.
Yeah. Up from here. I do kind of wonder, hindsight's 2020, and this Command Abrams stops Fëanor's tick. But the thing about Punch Bowl is you had already delayed his tick from +2 to +1, which I agree is necessary. But after that, this Command M1 is 160 points not going to Delta, and this is a crisis. This is full-on inches from losing the game crisis. And I think, that's already parked there. If this stuff was, instead of where it is on the road, if it was unloading right here, right now, which it could be if it was bought a little bit earlier, I think that would have been a much safer way to play it. Because this 2A1's alone, right? And you can look at that and say, okay, see, it wasn't a real crisis, but this engagement was inches. Yeah. It's not the world's worst thing, but it easily could have been. And even a single, like, a Gepard A2 is the difference between that going well and going poorly for each other side.
This is for kending placement. Yeah. I typically am not a user of this, but I know you are.
Oh yeah. If it's a funky angle I can use to kill your stuff at better cost, yeah, I'm gonna do that every single time.
So I'm a big fan of this Bravo push. Now that you're recognizing that you're rotating, you're doing well in Delta, adding a little bit of pressure and Bravo pushing that small team up, I think you're doing what you can with what you have asset-wise, and I think that's a right timing window to start doing stuff.
These guys are close enough, by the way. Oh yeah, nice. Very nice. Pop forward, pop back. Pop back.
He's gonna go for the KCT.
Oh, nice.
Pop back. Actually, I don't think he needs to pop back.
Yeah, nothing there to kill it anymore. You have eyes on the Core Mariner. That's a very nice Nighthawk target, by the way. So your Nighthawk is circling again.
Nighthawk out?
And here's the thing.
But
so
you lose vision.
Rangers up here with this, or the Cav Scouts farther forward, would have solved that, but another way to do that is just split this Rifleman 90 and walk one of them. Your Nighthawk is circling, the time to strike is now, it's why it was over there. If they start firing, your Rifleman's optics should be enough to pick them up. So that's another way. It's sort of like sacrificial recon, it's not ideal. But you don't always get away with ideal in this game, far from it. Right. I like the Stinger team here. Pivots. Your anti-air has been, at times, the absolute bare minimum required, and that's so risky, but it's held on by just as much as it needs to, and that. I mean, wow.
Your small teams have. I'm a big fan of small teams, and I'm actually a pretty big fan of the small teams in the Humvees.
Look at that. Pop them out. 1, 2.
Oh my. Yeah, and they're so good.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd actually say, I'd go so far as to say, you have the small teams here, you have the riflemen here. Once you've secured this, leave a rifleman and a small team, sort of a small team, not a small team, near sort of this section, and then sort of near this ramp as well, and gather your push past that a little bit later, because, oh, yep, there's the Nighthawk strike.
Good strike there.
That will save you a lot of pain if Blue decides to rotate back into that lower section of Delta later on. Eyes on the 2A1.
You have eyes on the 2A1, but honestly, at this point, Bravo hasn't been seeing much pressure from armored assets.
Oh, that's
still probably rotate that M1A1 over to Delta
still...
even now.
Yeah.
It's just it's sitting there. It's just sitting there, not really contributing. It doesn't need to be there to keep those tanks zoned out. You have Cav Scouts, as they're not a
and you'll have time.
Situation.
Even if there's a big build up here, you'll have time. I think that's really the key thing. Don't let things sit where you'll have time to respond. And sorry if there's some hammers in the background. You've probably noticed a couple of jump cuts. That's because they won't stop the flipping hammering, but we're trying. That one's small enough. I think we're just going to keep going, but yeah, I mean, geez. Because Whatkin is natural, like, he's getting incremental damage on you, yes. But even then, a single ranger squad is more than enough to handle this.
In all honesty, as well, I think you would have been better served by, if you want something to hold the line there, better served by a Bradley or.
Yeah, goodness gracious, hold on, there's hammers. Okay,
like,
so we have the Raven. Oh, this was a beautiful Raven.
Oh, is this a?
It's a dry seed run, but like.
Well, 1 kill, and then the Gepard's still alive, but you know, because Feanor's left his AA on, that the Gepard's really all that's left there. You can be aggressive with this longbow and try and hit the Gepard.
No, I do want to say the longbow getting out alive. Oh goodness gracious! Sorry about the hammers, guys. The longbow getting out alive is a little bit lucky. As many times as I've seen that survive, I've seen it die. And the Nighthawk coming in, like, this is the one blind bomb from the Nighthawk that I actually think was a good buy, because you're trying to save the longbow, well, a good target. You're trying to save the longbow. You do get the kill because there's really nowhere it would have gone without you seeing it, right? So even though it was blind, it's constrained. And so that, I think, is a lot better. And you can see now the impact of having the M1, the M551 here, to really sort of add a little bit of oomph. Imagine if this was behind your earlier infantry push, back when there was way less here from blue. I think that could have given you a much more stress-free game going into it. Okay, sorry about that last jump cut there. Yeah, there were just too many hammers, so unfortunately I'm finishing this without Haymaker, but I had to do enough jump cuts there. I didn't feel like I was doing it justice. I am sorry about that. Every time I thought they'd stop, like, we did a couple of jump cuts there, must have waited for about 20-ish minutes just to see if they would, you know, go take a lunch break or something, but never happened. So I think, well, I think we were going pretty strong here though, and talking about the addition of fire support to this sort of push, and this is one of those things where it comes down to a game of inches, right? And a little bit better infantry preservation earlier on would give you what you needed to get in here and through, and that is just, I mean, it happens so many times in games where it's just heart-wrenching. You just barely, almost, can get where you need to go with it, and you can't quite. And this is something, actually, one of those moments where you can watch the replay and think to yourself, well, I'm going to do unto others. This 2A1 placement here from Fëanor is very good. It's not quite perfect. It needs to be manually clicked a little bit farther forward. Just click a little bit outside the trees, and it'll go right up to the edge, get a little bit more vision. But that's what's really been nailing both your transports and the riflemen in the open. So if you want to deal with that, one thing you can do here to push this side is you can smoke off about this line vertical, and that will also cut the line of sight from anything back there, which this is a very common place you'll see tanks, especially in higher tier play, especially from lieutenant generals like Fëanor. So something there is you can smoke that off, and then that makes your approach just much easier. Yeah, a little unfortunate. CSs get bodied by Martyr 2s. I think you're... no, out of gas. That's so unfortunate. And I think... so if we look at right now, there's 14 minutes left, 83 to 13, and Longbow is rearming. That's fine. This is a bad problem, and we'll return to this later, because I think it is something that was left to sit here for far too long. Personally, if I'm playing on this map, I never ever feel safe in Foxtrot unless I have something with recon up here. And the reason why is this 13 FL12 gets vision on everything you're going to reinforce in through to this side, and can even be, well, pretty good at killing stuff that's in these sections of woods and towns. Not all the time, but certainly enough of it to make that be a significant problem. So another thing I would say is when you control a lot of this section, I think trying to cap right here is actually not the best. It's a good spot, don't get me wrong, but especially with this. So this is a 5 strength Jeep, and sure, it won't get hit if people go in artillerying here, something like that, but having it, I mean, don't use Jeeps, but then there are spots that you can hide. Like this is dense forest, and I believe this is also dense forest, yep. And a lot of these little sections of hedges are. and they're much less likely to be pushed by something that goes into Bravo in the late game. So here we have just something that should have caught your attention. I don't think it did. And this really expands on why you shouldn't feel safe unless you have that spot up there capped. And this is just, I mean, I think your focus was, as it should have been, over here. But when you see that blue dot, when you hear that buzzer sound, and it's something like over in Foxtrot, that needs desperate attention now. Because now you have a recon unit behind your front lines, and that is a really big problem. Another thing as well, I think these Panzergren were spotted as they went this way. They're at 9 strength, something shot at them. And just noticing stuff like that a little bit quicker will help quite a lot, I think. But really nice kill with the longbow, just coming in there and taking the double fire and forgets, and that should make you feel like you're in a pretty good spot, because you are. You definitely are. There's better spots to be in, but there's also way worse spots to be in, and I think actually the Patriot is the wrong buy. And here, let me explain why. So, the 104G, yeah, this is going to go after your longbow, but there are, I mean, your Pivots has been doing really good work for this as well. Playing a little more defensively with it might be able to save you some points, and you really want to capitalize. So, once you've killed that CV, you can probably count on your opponent trying to replace it, because he has to. You're taking +3, he has to deal with that somehow, some way, and doubling down on the ground can be an excellent way of dealing with this, because you basically say to your opponent, hey, you're gonna waste a minute's worth of income trying to recap that? Cool, I'm gonna have 100 more points on the ground dealing with your stuff. And that, I think, would go a long way. And alright, so M1, M1A1, cargo's here, good, riflemen, nice assault engineers unload. It can really help to have some recon around this side. I think we've mentioned pickets a couple of times before. This is another place that really needs it, because early warning on what's coming up this way can be make or break oftentimes. Your M1A1 survived this time, but there are units of infantry and or tanks that could have gone up there that would have killed that. Okay, so let's take a look. Yeah, I mean, with 10 minutes left, anytime you're taking +3, frankly, is just beautiful. 45 points every single minute, and a guaranteed couple of minutes before your opponent can do anything about it, because coming all this way, I believe, takes about 2.5 minutes, I want to say. Could be wrong on that. But you get that much tick pretty much guaranteed. So that's a really nice kill, and it's a really nice play. When I say play a little bit higher and tighter with the longbow, what I mean, yeah, exactly this. So drift back, keep it really over your own stuff near your pivots, because even if it's not directly over your pivots, if you're deep enough in your own territory, then most people aren't going to go for it. Why should they risk that? They've lost planes to that before. It's not worth the dive at that point. So that is just something to think about. Okay, so there's the Fuchs PR. I mean, look at how thin things are in Charlie, right? Fenor is spending every ounce of his strength maintaining the fight in Delta, and that alone is a big accomplishment that really just can't go without saying, because that is hard. It's very, very hard. I think instead of the Patriot, there probably should have been quite a lot more just riflemen. Do what USA does. Shove riflemen down his throat, backed up by an M1A1 Abrams, an M1 Abrams, things like that, if you can get it and keep it, and deny this section of town, right? Just keep the pressure cranked. You're shorter reinforcement length than he is. Oh, right, this. Yes, this is near catastrophic, right? And that Command Abrams, interestingly enough, look, the Command Abrams doesn't see this FL-12, but because of Eugen, it's auto-facing the nearest threat. Well, close enough to it anyway. It was previously looking this way, now it's not, and you're spotted. And yeah, the facing is a little specific, but if you can tell that you're spotted here, then this needs immediate attention. A plane probably will come in to kill that. So you save that, you get a little bit more tick, maybe you win instead of tie, or tie instead of lose, and those sorts of preservation aspects can definitely make the difference. I don't think the longbow, it doesn't look like this was tasked over here. I think you're just going up to mid. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. You're shooting at other stuff, he's shooting at you. That's how it goes. I mean, but look at how fragile this is. 3 KCT, 1 ATGM. Just very, very fragile indeed. Yeah, I'll go back over here to deal with the 2A1 probably. Yeah, there it is. Peace Shrine and KWS. So he's flying a strike plane and cover. And that's going to come in. And actually, interesting thing here, because of the auto-facing, the side would have been if he went right on, but he's probably not doing that because the assumption is that you have anti-air and echo, and this would ordinarily be a side shot. So, funnily enough, this is going to go in against front armor, I believe. Yep, 1-2. But that's all he needs. So, down to +2, but still, I mean, down to +2 is a bit of a statement here. Yeah. Okay. This is something Fëanor likes to do that I haven't seen a ton of other people who do with this. It's the late game 1-point push, and Fëanor's very good at it. Basically, what's going to happen here, I mean, what you can see, what you experienced, I'm sure, you get flooded by enough chaff and then a single large tank that is very hard to deal with. And the key here is to deal with the tank. If you can deal with the tank, then you can very often handle what comes next, but you have to deal with it quickly. And that's just, it's hard to do when there's so little in the way. And this is just a consequence of a hard-fought game, right? Like, you've been buying appropriate reinforcements over here, you're now doing that rifleman spam that I had mentioned earlier, and there's not very much there. Like, at this point too, you can lose the 1-pointers. As long as you don't lose Delta, you're probably in a good spot. I mean, he can cap both of those. Bravo is going to counter cap, he's going to only get a +1 for 6 minutes. You are going to be in the clear. So this may seem like a crisis. And it's not good, don't get me wrong, it's not good. But this is still more important. This Fuchs is still more important. And this is one of those things that you just have to, it's very hard to do in the middle of the game. You have to make yourself take a step back and think, what is my path to victory? What is my opponent's path to victory? And your opponent's path to victory is here. It's not here. Much as he might like it to be, it's not. If you deny this Fuchs, then there's pretty much nothing he can do at this point. 6 minutes of +15, that's going to be 3, 6, 9, 90 points, and you get a win. It's not a amazingly point differential win. It's gonna kind of suck in terms of how it could have been, like 228 to 90 instead of 228 to 200, but it's still a win against Lieutenant General. That is its own reward, that is its own accomplishment, right? And none of this stuff at this point will make or break that nearly so much as this zone will. So here we're running into a little bit of the same problem. This M1A1, I mean, it's just a little bit of, it's not being resupplied, just barely. There we go. But it needs to be in when you're doing this push. So a little bit earlier resupply, and then if you need to, delay the push by 45 seconds to get the M1A1 back in fighting shape. Always keep your tanks resupplied ASAP. Fëanor's been doing that to the best of his ability. Here, that's not going to be all that well. And yeah, I mean, this is just, it's so close to successful, it really just hurts to see. I was really hoping, by the way, that the Cav Scouts would get a 2A1 kill, but I mean, they're still just Cav Scouts. And then without the M1A1, nothing there to balance out the 2A1. That's a crime, by the way. I think it deals 50, it's like half a point of damage. And the tank survives, which is just, oh, that's so rough. I mean, 2 KCT. Yeah. So, okay, with 4 minutes on the clock, that is going to be 120 points, and that is a loss. So you have to do something about that. And this is one of those things where like a couple of minutes and a little bit of focus changes things dramatically. The longbow being over here to kill the Fuchs again, you did it once before. Do the same thing again. And the decision point is whether or not you go left to try to bail out Foxtrot, or whether you go right to say, no, we cannot have this. And I think going right and saying, no, you cannot have this, might well have won you the game. Which, I mean, hey, if a single decision is the only difference between you and a Lieutenant General in a match, like, yeah, you take what you can get, and it's quite nice. So, I think that's going to be most of what I've got to say. Other than that, I really can't harp on enough, strongly enough, the importance of recon along Delta. And part of the reason for that, I don't even think that YPR will get there in time, jeez, is because I don't think you saw this, or if you did, it wasn't reliably. Yeah, okay, you do now. But there's nothing really to deal with it, and that's a problem. So never, 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 ever leave this section of Delta without something overlooking those approaches after your opponent has already used those ones. If he's never used it and you really need the point somewhere else, you can take the risk, but it is still a risk. And that risk, I mean, yeah, we're about to see, right? So here you get unlucky. FL12 dealing with the M1. Optical failure is pretty much the worst crit. I mean, even firing computer reset wouldn't have been quite so bad. Weapons jammed clearly would have been. But this is one of 2 crits that would have had the FL12 win that fight. There's nothing you can do to anticipate that. So, yeah. I guess at this point, the only other thing I'd say is that this is where some of the disposable helicopters, the 60-pointers, having those still alive instead of thrown at the wall, could have made a difference if one of them was here to deal with the FL12. But even that would have struggled against the escort here. So this is unfortunately a little bit of late game. Both of you guys are newly exhausted. I mean, Amex Pre's killing a Jeep. Like, there's need I say more about Jeeps, man? And I hope you don't take them anymore, at least in 1v1. In team games, they can have their purpose, but even then, I cannot advise you ever take a Jeep. So that's going to flip +3. I see what you're doing with the CV buy there. Switching the command Abrams over here. It's just going to be too late. Yeah. Just going to take too long. I'm not sure really who wins this fight. I think... Ooh. Wow. Oh, okay, the Pivaz is backing up the longbow. I was going to say that was a lot quicker than I would have expected. For that. Peace Shrine. Oh, man. Well, anyway, in summary, I am sorry it took me so long to get this out. I thought I had it uploaded and, you know, released as I think nearly a month ago now. And then I re-recorded it, and then I've re-recorded it again. So I wanted to take the opportunity with Haymaker to give some good comments because he's such a different style, and I hope that was helpful while we had him around. I'm sorry we had so many jump cuts as well. Things are, as you guys well know, a little bit on the busy side, which really sucks because this has been a hobby that has really kept me going for a lot of the last, I guess, year and a half almost now. And I don't want to do it a disservice by just not being around as much. It's just the reality of life sometimes. And with the tourney going, things like that, it's just been busy. But I'm hoping to turn that around, as always, and maybe one day that will come to fruition, hopefully soon. So, thank you, Donski / TipsyMipsy, for sending this in. It was my pleasure to do the replay review, and you've been doing well in the tourney, I believe. I wish you the best of luck, and I appreciate you doing that as well. I think bringing in some newer players and giving them your help will be very much a good thing. Okay, thank you all for hanging around. We'll see you again real soon.